Ghostface goes on this, skit on the album where he basically, without naming names, he pretty much did.
Call me and he's like, yo, with them Wu niggas. You knew they said that.
Wu-Tang was deep as I don't know if, a lot of people, but Wu-Tang Clan was to be deep as I'm talking about, deep as 100 people. That's a lot of people to be in.
Biggie and Wu-Tang Clan went from working together to having one of the most intense fallouts in hip-hop history, specifically with Ghostface Killa and Raekwon.
And when he said it, it was like, we knew that later on it could be an issue about it, but we didn't care. We were 25, we was fresh.
The tension between them got so serious, it nearly turned deadly. Let's take a closer look. So, every real hip-hop head knows that The What, the collab between Biggie and Method Man on Biggie's Ready to Die album, is straight up legendary. It's one of those timeless joints that still hits hard today. But what a lot of folks don't realize is that this iconic moment in rap history almost never happened. And the reason was because of RZA.
There was a rumor that Meth got on the record with Big and that you did not want that to happen.
Now, if you know anything about Wu-Tang Clan, then you know RZA wasn't just the producer. He was the mastermind behind the whole Wu movement. He was extremely protective of their sound, their image, and their vision. Wu-Tang had built this raw, gritty, and very distinct identity, and RZA wasn't trying to let outside influences mess with that. So when the idea came up for Method Man to jump on a track with Biggie, RZA wasn't feeling it at first. He didn't want Meth stepping outside the circle and blending Wu-Tang's style with something he didn't control. Plus, at the time, Wu-Tang was just starting to dominate. It was their moment, and RZA didn't want anyone else eating off that shine, not even someone as talented as Biggie.
Okay. No, I didn't want Wu rhyming on nobody beats.
Or was it the beats?
It was just like, it was our time, and it was just like, I didn't want nobody else shining in that moment.
But then, an A&R executive by the name of Tracy Waples stepped in. She had her finger on the pulse of what was hot and where the culture was headed. She saw the potential of bridging the two forces, Biggie and Meth, and she brought the idea to RZA with serious passion.
I will give but Tracy Waples, first of all,
Tracy Waples, big up.
Dope A&Rs,
Yep.
just another unsung hero of hip hop, probably.
Right.
She pitched that idea.
RZA respected her. And even though he was hesitant, he trusted her judgment enough to finally give it the green light. That decision paid off big time. The What became a certified classic, a perfect fusion of Brooklyn grit and Staten Island swagger. Decades later, it's still one of those records people look back on as a peak hip-hop moment. But just when it seemed like things were smooth between the Wu-Tang and Biggie camps, tensions flared up again. On the very next Wu-Tang project, Ghostface Killa and Raekwon came out swinging. They sent some thinly veiled shots at Biggie, and just like that, the piece that seemed to be forming started to crack.
Say yes, though.
She pitched the what idea?
She pitched the idea of Meth and Biggie doing a song together.
To really understand how things got so heated between Biggie and Wu-Tang, you gotta rewind the tape all the way back to 1995. This wasn't just any year, it was the heart of hip-hop's golden era. The energy was crazy. Legends were dropping classic albums back to back, the sound was evolving, and New York was the epicenter of it all. But along with all that creativity and greatness came a ton of tension. Because in that era, every move you made mattered. Every verse, every sample, every beat, and especially every album cover, everything had weight. And one thing that was considered a serious offense back then was biting, straight up copying someone's style or idea. That was like committing a cultural crime in hip-hop. It was the ultimate sign of disrespect. You didn't just get clowned for it, you could start a full-blown war over it. So when Raekwon dropped Only Built for Cuban Links, an album that would go on to become a certified classic, it wasn't just the music people were paying attention to. Tucked away in that album was a skit. In it, Ghostface Killa goes off, calling out rappers who steal other people's ideas. He doesn't name names, but the streets knew. Everyone in the industry knew. He was talking about one man, the notorious B.I.G.
This nigga biting off your album cover. Yeah. Boom, bad enough they biting lines like killed me when they came with some bit off a Nas.
Now from Ray and Ghost's point of view, this wasn't just some petty jab. This was personal. These guys were close with Nas, and in their eyes, Nas's Illmatic cover was iconic. It was a young Nas with the Queensbridge backdrop behind him, symbolizing his roots, his story, his identity. So when they saw Biggie's Ready to Die cover, with that baby sitting front and center, it felt way too familiar. To them, it wasn't a coincidence. It looked like Biggie was borrowing from Nas's blueprint and running with it like it was his own. But here's what they didn't realize. There was no beef between Nas and Biggie. In fact, behind the scenes, they had a lot of mutual respect for each other. They were cool. It wasn't even like that. But in 1995, when everyone had a chip on their shoulder and rap was built on reputation and ego, none of that mattered. Perception was everything. And from the outside looking in, it seemed like Big had crossed a line.
We had a certain respect for Nas. At that time, like I said, when Ghost said what he said, it wasn't nothing premeditated. We all competitive, whether we like you or not. It's just competition. If it goes somewhere, then that's something else. But it was always about the sport.
Word got back to Biggie quick, and he wasn't happy about it. According to Nas himself, Biggie actually called him up, upset. Nas recalled that Big said, "Yo, you effing with them Wu You knew they said that ish?" Nas had to keep it real with him. He was like, "Yo, I mean that's Ghost. Ghostface is Ghostface. There's no love lost. I didn't know he was going to say this ish." Nas tried to explain it wasn't about him choosing sides, and that Big was taking it harder than he needed to.
Big called me and he's like, "Yo, with them Wu nigga." You knew they said I mean, that's Ghost.
Right.
Ghostface is Ghostface. There's no love lost. I didn't know he was gonna say this.
Biggie, though, felt misunderstood. He wasn't trying to copy anyone. If you actually listened to Ready to Die, it had its own voice, its own story, its own identity. But in that moment, it didn't matter what he meant. It was about how people perceived it.
He wasn't trying to bite off my no, just in general, because he wasn't coming at it like that. Because if you listen to his album, he tell a whole story.
Now Big could have easily gone full scorched earth. He could have put out a diss track and let it all fly. In fact, he did go into the studio and lay down a track going at Ghost and Ray. Word is, he poured all that frustration and anger into the mic. But this is where Biggie showed how smart he really was. He laid it all down, listened back, sat with it, and then made the call. He told his manager at the time, Jacob York, to scrap it. Delete it. Don't let it see the light of day. Jacob would later talk about it on the Bossip Presents Don't Be Scared podcast. He said, Biggie never put out a diss record against him. He rapped it, got it off his chest, then told me to erase it. And honestly, that probably saved the entire New York rap scene from going up in flames, because back then, a diss track from Biggie could have sparked something serious. But Big didn't just stay silent either. He was too clever for that. Instead of coming at them directly, he laced his rebuttal in slick subliminals. On Kickin' the Door, he raps, "This goes out for those that choose to use." Disrespectful views on the King of New York. He didn't need to drop names. The message was loud and clear. He heard the shade, and he wasn't going to let anyone try to knock his crown off without responding. Then came that night, the one where everything could have gone completely left. A night that, if things had popped off, might have gone down as one of the darkest chapters in hip-hop history. The energy was tense, the kind of setup where all it takes is one sideways glance or one wrong word to flip the whole place upside down. It all went down at a packed nightclub in Manhattan's West Side, and if you were writing a movie script for disaster, this would have been your climax scene. High-profile rappers, crews full of real street dudes, liquor flowing, egos in overdrive, everything was in place for something wild to go down. Enter Peter Pistol. Pete wasn't just another guy in the crowd. This was someone with serious respect in the streets, a name that carried weight. And right beside him that night was D-Rock, Biggie's right-hand man and one of the realest people in Big's circle. Their bond wasn't some flashy industry friendship. It was built off loyalty, years of real-life trenches, and surviving some serious trials together. So when D-Rock came up to Pete that night, moving with purpose, face tight with concern, Pete didn't need a whole explanation. He didn't need the details. The look in D-Rock's eyes said it all. Yo, Wu-Tang's trying to press Big. We might have a situation.
Yeah, so D-Rock came to me, he was like, yo, what's up, Pistol? What up? Yo, what up, D? He said, yo, so he was, like, yo, these guys trying to front on Biggie and shit like that, man. Like I might need you to, help us out, hold me down.
And Pete didn't panic. He didn't start waving his hands like some hype dude trying to get attention. Instead, he moved the way real street vets move, quiet, focused, ready. He signaled to his people, and just like that, the atmosphere changed. His crew knew what time it was. They weren't there to start anything, but they damn sure weren't about to let anything happen to Biggie either. See, the thing about Wu-Tang is, they weren't just rolling with rappers. Their squad was deep with dudes who had serious street ties, people who didn't play games. If it went down that night, it wasn't gonna be some quick scuffle. It would have turned into a full-on brawl, maybe worse. That club would have gone from party to battleground in seconds. So there they were. On one side of the room, Biggie and his team, standing firm. On the other, Wu-Tang and their squad, watching just as closely, holding position. And for what felt like forever, the whole place froze. Like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see who would make the first move. But here's where the story takes that left turn that saved the night. Pete looked across the room and locked eyes with Raekwon. And instead of letting pride or heat take over, he did what a real OG does. He made the first move. He stepped up to talk, and Raekwon heard him, because Ray wasn't trying to bring heat down on the whole spot either. They both knew what could happen if they let their crews loose, and neither wanted that blood on their hands. And that was it. Cooler heads prevailed. The situation that could have turned into one of hip-hop's ugliest moments got diffused because two real ones chose peace over pointless beef. Years later, Pete's spoken about that night, and he's always kept it 100. He never brags, never spins it like Biggie and his people punked Wu-Tang. In fact, Pete has always given props to Raekwon, Ghostface, Method Man, all of them. Because at the end of the day, they were all coming from the same world. Street guys who made it into music, trying to navigate fame while still carrying the codes of the block.
Wu-Tang was deep as I don't know if, a lot of people, but Wu-Tang Clan was to be deep as I'm talking about, deep as 100 people. That's a lot of people to be.
They understood the weight of their presence. They knew how fast things could turn fatal. And on that night, they chose to step back from the edge instead of falling off it. But years after all the tension, the back and forths, and the misunderstandings that had built up between the Wu-Tang Clan and Biggie's camp, the most meaningful moment came, unexpectedly. Ghostface was at LA Live with the rest of the Wu-Tang crew, Ray, Cap, U-God, and a few others. They were running late, and as they walked in, Ghost's eyes caught someone standing by the bar. It was Biggie. There he was, chilling with his guy, just posted up like any other night. And in that moment, Ghost made a decision that had been building inside him for a while. I just slid to him because I had thought about doing so a while ago. My intention was just to clear the air and make some music, you know what I mean? That was my intention, so when I seen him, I went over and said peace to him and gave him a pound. It wasn't some loud reunion or over-the-top moment. It was simple, respectful, grown man energy. Ghost remembers thinking Big was taller than he expected, even laughing a little about how awkward the moment felt because they'd never actually spoken before. But in that split second, all the past tension melted away. He just stood above me. We both said peace to each other and things got quiet. Sadly, that would be the first and last time Ghostface Killa ever saw Biggie in person. Just days after that meeting, Biggie was tragically murdered in Los Angeles. And for Ghost, it hit different. That ish broke my heart. It really broke my heart. says Ghost. I think I might have felt his death more than 2P's death. Maybe because he was so much closer to us, being from New York and all that. I don't know what it was, but it was something about his passing that affected me. He was great. Ghostface didn't just mourn Biggie the artist, he mourned what Biggie represented. That era of hip-hop where artists inspired each other, where iron sharpened iron. He talked about how back then, when Nas dropped a track, it lit a fire under everyone. When Biggie released something heavy, Ghost knew he had to step his game up. That kind of creative competition pushed the culture forward. I'm not inspired by today's music, you know what I mean? I F with it just because, but I'm not inspired by it. When reflecting on Biggie's legacy, Ghostface couldn't help but marvel at how much impact Big had with just 2 albums. Back then, it was a bunch of cats inspiring others. When asked about the legacy and impact B.I.G. left in hip-hop, Ghost complimented Christopher Wallace for creating such a strong presence in the rap game in a short amount of time. You know, even though he had 2 albums when he passed away, and to be labeled as one of the greatest of all time, it's crazy. Imagine if he would have still been here. That would have been dangerous. Now, as mentioned, Wu-Tang might have been known for their bars, but they were really about that life. So it's no surprise that Biggie wasn't the only major figure they had tension with. Truth is, at one point, things got so real, they nearly found themselves going toe-to-toe with actual mafias. So it's the mid-90s, and Wu-Tang Clan is taking over the game. Their rise was like smoke drifting out of Shaolin, steady, unstoppable, and catching attention everywhere. Raekwon, one of the sharpest lyricists in the group, was gearing up for his first solo album. And from the jump, he had a vision. The original title he wanted, Wu Gambinos.
Yes, when you were coming together, doing the Cuban Links project, originally, the project was supposed to be called Wu Gambinos.
It fit perfectly. Wu-Tang's whole vibe at that time was soaked in that cinematic mafia energy. They were creating worlds that felt like Scarface, Goodfellas, Casino, and Once Upon a Time in America all rolled into one. So for Ray, stamping Wu Gambinos on the album felt like the ultimate statement. They were about to take that mafioso aesthetic and make it official in name. But here's where it gets tricky. While the Wu were busy crafting their mafia-inspired masterpiece, the real Gambino family, the infamous New York crime syndicate, one of the 5 families, was still very much active. And for those who don't know, the Gambinos were ruthless. They were involved in pretty much every kind of unhinged and violent crime you could imagine. Murder, extortion, racketeering, drug trafficking, you name it, they were in it deep.
The Gambinos. No crime family in America has been as powerful, as wealthy, or as treacherous.
So it's no surprise they weren't in the business of handing out naming rights to rappers. Using their name on an album cover wasn't just risky, it could have been straight up dangerous. That's when Steve Rifkind, the boss over at Loud Records, Wu-Tang's label, got the call. Steve's dad was a respected music industry veteran who had connections on both sides, legit and otherwise. He passed the word along, tell them not to do it.
Raekwon wanted to call the album, instead of Only Built for Cuban Links, he wanted to call it
Wu Gambinos.
But then a phone call came in from the actual Gambinos. Tell me about.
My father called me. Somebody called him and said they heard that, and they didn't want the name.
This wasn't about legal battles or bad press. This was a real-world warning. You don't throw a mob family's name on your album in New York City and think nobody's going to say something. The Gambinos weren't going to sit back and let someone sell records off their name. Raekwon wasn't feeling it at first. He wasn't trying to back down. In interviews, he's admitted that at the time, he was ready to take that risk.
How you just gonna use that name like that and run with it, you know what I mean? So, you know, it was something funny to me because I'm like, I'm doing it anyway.
The mindset was, we're Wu-Tang. We do what we want. But sometimes, being smart means knowing when to step back. After some serious thought and probably some serious conversations, they decided it wasn't worth it. That's when the title switched to what we now know as Only Built for Cuban Links, one of the most legendary albums in hip-hop history. The vibe stayed mafioso to the core, but without the direct tie to the real-life Gambinos. And just because they changed the album title, didn't mean they abandoned the theme. They still dropped the track Wu Gambinos on the album, and that's where members took on those now iconic aliases. Raekwon as Lex Diamonds, Ghostface Killa as Tony Starks, RZA as Bobby Steels, and so on. It was a smart way to keep paying homage to that underworld style without stepping on toes that could get you hurt. Raekwon later reflected on the decision, keeping it real. Back then, our mentality was to take the risk, F it. But we had to second guess that motion and be like, you know what? Don't do it. And Steve Rifkin put it plain and simple. Mafia told Raekwon not to title his album Wu Gambinos. That's a fact.
You know, back then our mentality was, we'll take the risk. But, you know, like I said, being young and kind of like a little immature.
It's one of those stories that sounds like rap mythology, too wild to be true, but it really happened. Wu-Tang, a group that always flirted with the legacy of the underworld, got a polite but firm reminder from the real underworld to leave certain names alone, and they listened.